panel we have right down here, Jimmy Himes. We have Ryan Callahan right here, Tyler Ivins, and Bob Hodge right there. And you can read the little graphics under their names. That'll tell you exactly where these guys are. Because we've got to save time. We've got to get right into this. I don't have time to tell people where you're from. All right, let's take a look. You heard me mention it, the new SEC. And there's a new pinwheel graphic, if you remember the old-fashioned pinwheel graphic when it was just 10 teams back in the day. Now, 16 teams, as you've wedged in the last few years. Texas A&M and Missouri on. Now you've got Texas and Oklahoma on that thing. A lot of schools. It's getting too many schools for the pinwheel graphic. And then if you look at it team by team here, the full Southeastern Conference, there you see it. And Texas and Oklahoma highlighted there as the new teams. But that is a brave new world. When you talk about rivalries and relationships, I think one of the reasons that some schools, and we'll discuss this, some schools don't feel like they're really rivals. I don't know if it's necessarily the school as much as you just don't see teams as much. You might come to hate them if you saw them more. So we'll discuss all of that today, but I want to start talking about that. I've not talked to anyone, no one, in terms of fandom, who looks at this move and says, oh, I'm so happy. I mean, from a financial standpoint, we all know your local school is going to get more money from the SEC with bigger TV contracts, et cetera. That's great, but I don't know that the fans enjoy the money that's passing through Danny White's hands over there. That said, maybe there's a spinoff of that. What are the positives? Let's try and figure this out. Maybe there are 10 that I'm just not thinking of. Maybe there are none. But from a fan's perspective, what are the positives to adding Oklahoma and Texas? Anyone?
I'll give you one that I think a lot of times the Tennessee fan base, and it's not just a Tennessee fan base, but if Tennessee's playing a game in Norman, Oklahoma, or if they're going to Oregon or making a road trip, a lot of fans want to go to those road trips. I think a lot of fans in the SEC, not just Tennessee, but would like to go to Austin, Texas, and would like to go to Norman, Oklahoma. It's a new experience. I think you'll get pretty good attendance from the visiting teams. Now, that could wear off, but for the immediate future, I think that would be one of the positives. It would be a nice road trip for fans to go to a venue they haven't been to.
Immediately a negative that I will go into with that, and I know it's one thing that everybody wants to talk about. We only have 8 conference games right now. How often and long did it take for Tennessee to square off against Texas A&M whenever they first got brought in 2012? Yeah. This is another one of those situations where you got to have a 9-game conference schedule, because we did see Tennessee fans show up in Norman when they did the home and home. Austin is a beautiful town, as you've already pointed out. It's great from an SEC standpoint. How long until you actually see a Tennessee fan walk through the gates of Darrell K. Royal Stadium? It could be some time.
But I'll give Jimmy credit for trying. At least he tried and still got immediately shot down. But I agree on the Austin thing. I think Norman, once somebody goes, they're going to go, okay, this is cool. Austin's a pretty fun city. It's got a great reputation. I think that's one that people may every year, well, you're not going to get them every year, but every time you're in Texas, I could see every 8 years, you could see folks going down there.
Well,
Ryan, go ahead.
I was say that's where I was going with it too. I think the road trip aspect. Norman's just outside Oklahoma City, so it's not a bad road trip as far as that's concerned. I mean, there are things to do there. Norman's an okay college town. It's a fun road trip.
Okay college.
Yeah,
Oklahoma. That's good.
So I think that is a positive of this, and I think that's where most fans will start, because they're looking for a little variety. Sometimes you get tired of playing the same 12, 14 teams in the conference. So I think that's where I would start for sure. I would also just say, in the arms race, and you could argue, sure, the SEC started all this, so it's their fault, but if you're keeping up with the Big Ten, this at least strengthens the SEC's argument as the king of college football. Adding Oklahoma and Texas keeps you at the top of the mountain, whereas if you stood by and watched the Big Ten just add Oregon, USC, all these other teams, you might fall to second place in some people's minds.
See, I will counter that you get tired of seeing the same teams, because we haven't seen the same teams.
Yeah.
I don't think you didn't see Texas A&M enough. Auburn, I mean, it pops up every now and then, but I used to like seeing Auburn every year, and now you don't get to see it. I know that you've got, Ole Miss. I don't think seeing the same teams in the conference is much of a problem. If I'm looking for a positive, and this is stretching one to about the point the rubber band breaks, I will typically, if I'm not at a Tennessee game, there's nothing going on, I'll watch Texas and Oklahoma, the Red River game. Okay, I'll turn that one on. Okay, now it's an SEC game. Texas and Texas A&M, a fun old rivalry from decade ago, 2 decades ago, whatever. Okay, that one's now an SEC game. So that makes it a little more interesting, because most fans, if you're a Tennessee fan, typically you have a rooting interest in other SEC games, especially when you're a pretty good football team, because I need this team to win, that team to lose. So that's a little interesting, but I'm talking from a TV perspective, and I'm talking about certain marquee games. As far as the overall big picture, I turn it back over to you.
I've got one, maybe, and that is if you're good enough. You clearly, as you say, you've differentiated yourself. It used to be the Power 5. It's now the Power 2. Mm-hmm. The SEC and the Big Ten, they're going to get more bids into all of the playoffs. I think they're going to get more bids in any conference in the playoffs, which down the road may mean that your school, Tennessee here, or if you're watching this on YouTube and you're sitting out in Oklahoma, maybe your school, Oklahoma, I think you're going to have more opportunities to play for national championships because your league is going to get more bids. Boy, that is a stretch, though, because you have to be good enough to get one of those bids and then make something with those bids, and that's awfully businessy, and I don't know that fans ever get interested in the businessy side of it, but maybe that's the only thing I could come up with was the fact that, okay, you're probably going to get more bids into national tournaments, the college football playoff, and that may result in more championships for your team.
And I can see that being a real possibility. But the key to what you all just said is, and you said it a couple times, you got to be good.
Yeah.
I think if you're, say you're Kentucky football.
Yeah.
Which, okay, you're better than you've been historically, and that's great.
Yeah.
But you're not been at that level where you're competing for the postseason. So does it make it better for you, or does that, okay, now somebody else is tamping is farther back down?
What's it do for Mississippi State?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just see overall as a league, if you're a fan, I just can't, it's hard to find the positives.
Tyler, you get 20 seconds. Can you come up with a positive?
0. I'm like a 4-year-old kicking and screaming in the grocery store. I didn't want it to happen in 12 when I was covering other markets and other conferences. I sure as heck don't want to see it happen in 24, but here we are.
Yeah, here we are. All right. Very good. When we come back, the 4 remaining power conferences have all taken on teams this summer. They're all looking for brand names now. That's what you're after. Every line of extension, every time they expand, it changes what they're looking for. So my question is, we'll show you who's been added to each of the 4 main conferences. Who won this round? Let's discuss that next. Come on back on the sport.